Hi, I'm Celia Boothman, founder of LTR Coaching, and I'd like to welcome you to the Inspired Triathletes podcast, where I'll be bringing you stories from female triathletes and taking on topics that are important to women in the sport. I'm here with Caroline Livesey, who is an elite triathlete. She's just come back from Patagonia, where she won Patagonman for how many times have you won it now? Is it?
That was the second time.
The second time that you've won it. So yeah, just for people that don't know, I think they'd be really interested in a little bit of an overview on Patagonman and what it entails, and yeah, your experience out there.
Sure. Right. Thank you for having me on. So I've been doing triathlon for 20 years, slightly more, a long time. And I've raced all over the world. I used to race professionally, sort of on the Ironman circuit, um, and went over to sort of extreme Xtri triathlons in 2019. Patagonman I first went to in 2018 with my husband, so he raced it then. That was the first year that it started. And he's also been in triathlon for a very long time. And he said it was the best experience that he's ever had. And of course, crewing him, I saw the course and, saw the place, and I was just desperate to go back and race it. And then the first opportunity I had was 2022, and I went down there. And it just had the most amazing time. It is, for me, without a doubt, the best experience there is in triathlon. So it's a long distance extreme triathlon. So it's a 3.8k swim, 180k bike, and it's actually more than a marathon. That race is about 45 kilometers. And I mean, extreme triathlon just means that there are elements of the race which are slightly more extreme than your average sort of Ironman type course. So in this case, the swim is pretty cold. It's generally between 10 and 14 degrees. This year it was 12 degrees. You jump off the back of a ferry into a sea fjord. The swim actually does vary in distance because it's so rare for them to have perfect conditions to be able to do the sort of full 3.8k course. This year, so the first year I did it was actually only about, I don't know, a k and a half because the weather was so bad.
Yeah.
This year it ended up being 3.2, and they shortened it slightly because there was a really strong current against us. So we were in the water for about an hour, like sort of normal 3.8k type time. The bike is 2,500 meters elevation over the 180k, and it's road. So I was on a TT bike. It's just the most incredible course through 3 completely different landscapes in Patagonia, and it's just wonderful. Very hard, very windy, mostly a tailwind, but at the back end of the course, it's a very strong headwind, which can stop people in their tracks.
Yeah.
And then the run is on gravel. There's a bit of trail at the start, and then you're on like a gravel road, but it's not tarmac. None of it's tarmac. And it has, I think, 900 meters elevation on the course. You're out in the wilderness, and it's epically beautiful. Yeah, and I was lucky enough to win in 2022, and a lot of people have asked me why I decided to go back. And I couldn't really explain it until after I did the race this year. And I think the best way to explain it is it was like the first time I did it was like when you go and see a really amazing movie and you can't quite take it all in, or like your wedding day or some other like big event in your life, and it just is a blur because it's too much for your brain to process everything. It's such, it's like the emotion of it, all your senses is kind of just, it's like high definition. And I wanted to go back and just be able to kind of live it and be more present and be, just experience it all again. And I had an incredible day again this year, and I won it again. So Very
Yeah,
pleased.
but with a extra bonus of winning the race is amazing.
Yes. Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
That's
must
not
feel
the
really.
reason I went. I mean, it was, it is just a wonderful experience, that race, and I would highly recommend it to anybody um,
Yeah. And
in our
that's a nice
sport.
way to be there as well, like wanting to experience it rather than going out for a particular result or anything like that. To
Yes.
be
Yeah.
able to be free like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and it's also point to point, isn't it? So you go, you don't do a loop or anything like that. You actually travel
Mm.
from one place to
Yeah.
another.
Yeah. And that's a really wonderful way to race as well. And one of the things that I hate about the way that long course racing has developed is the looped courses,
Mm.
and the very kind of samey nature of all the courses. Um, and the wonderful thing about this race in particular is that you also, so it is point to point. You literally finish 200 and whatever kilometers away from where you start.
Mm.
um, but it's also through 3 or 4 completely different landscapes and environments. You
Mm.
start at sea level in a kind of, it's a rainforest, but it's obviously a cold rainforest. It rains 360 days of the year or something down in Puerto Chacabuco where it starts. So it's
Right.
pretty much always raining. But they
Yeah.
have the most incredible flora and fauna. It's just, it's crazy. It's a really beautiful place. And then you go through just like this plateau of kind of a tundra, and then you go up into like a mountain range where there's snow on the hills, and it's like a moonscape almost. And then on the run you have this wonderful backdrop of these snowy mountains, and you're kind of in a
Mm.
forest, and
Wow.
it's just stunning. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. And
Mm.
is it at altitude at all then with the
Not really,
mountains or
no.
not? No.
No, no.
Okay.
I think the highest you get to is about 1,000 meters.
Okay. So
Yeah.
there's no like problem with getting used to the altitude
No,
or anything
no
like that.
altitude, but definitely gets pretty cold. So
Yeah.
T2 is a place called Cerro Castillo, and this year I heard quite a lot of athletes. I was fine, but I heard quite a lot of athletes saying they were colder in T2 than they had been out of the water in T1.
Right.
And the back end of the bike was probably like 3 or 4 degrees.
Oof. Yeah, that is cold.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw some
So
photos of you and you're all wrapped up in like jackets and things like that with a big smile on your face. You look like
yes,
you're really
yeah,
enjoying it.
yes, yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
was in shorts and a t-shirt on the run,
Yeah.
but it probably was highs of 15 at most. It was maybe 10 degrees at the coldest points on the run for me. But then people who were like, further back, who took longer, who,
Oh, yeah.
like it obviously got colder as the day progressed
Mm.
into the evening and into the night. They would have been really wrapped up for sure on the run.
Yeah, definitely. And do you have to have someone supporting you as well for that race? Like you have, oh,
Yeah, so for most of the X tries, and this one, yes, for sure, you need a support crew. So they are your rolling aid station, basically.
mm,
The organisation doesn't provide, although I say they don't provide any aid stations, they actually do on this race. They have one on the bike, and on the run, there's one at 10K and one at 20K. And then you can meet your support crew at 30K on the run, and they could run the rest of the run with you. But on the bike, they can basically drive the car and leapfrog you. So you'll see them, every, well, however often you want, really, and they can have anything that you need in the car. You can stop and put more clothes on, or take stuff off, or have different food that you want, or whatever it
mm,
is. And um, yeah, and I think it's a really lovely aspect of Xtri, because you're not
mm,
then doing the race on your own. You're doing it
yeah,
as part of a team, and although you're the one who's racing, the team is so critical and fundamental to your success or your experience that day,
mm.
that it really does feel like a massive team effort, and it's very different sharing that sort of emotion at the finish.
Yeah, definitely. I could. There's been one event that I've done where I needed support, and I was like, I want to do it this year because I want my mum to support me, and it's probably, it's going to be a bit difficult for her when she
Mhm.
gets a bit older, and following the sat nav and all this sort of stuff. She was a bit stressed about it, but
Yeah.
she loved it, and it was so
Yes.
nice to finish and have her there as well. Like when at the end, and yeah, she was kind of like part of the whole experience, and she really enjoyed it. She was like quite happy to have done it in the end. although
Oh,
she's
it
nervous
is
about it.
amazing. Yeah. Oh, well
Yeah.
done you. It's lovely sharing it with family. And actually, one of the things that struck me this year in Patagonia was how much the race has grown. And I don't mean in terms of the number of athletes competing because they have to keep that capped.
Yeah.
So it's around 200 to 300 people who do the race. But the number of people they brought with them this
Mm.
year just seemed to be a lot more. So instead of just taking like one person as a support group, people were taking their whole families,
Oh,
like
wow.
6 people. And they can't all be in the support car, but everyone was there to support and just enjoy the region because the region is
Yeah.
spectacular and it's a great place for to have an adventure holiday for all the normal outdoor activities. And I mean, Patagonia is just an insane place. It's absolutely wonderful. And I think people have realized, like, if I'm going to go down here and do this big event and I expect my husband, wife, dad, mum, whatever to come and support me, then let's go and make a big holiday of it and actually
Yeah.
spend a couple of weeks there.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely worth doing, definitely worth
Yeah.
having a go at, and if you can, involving your family. I know it is, it just makes it so much better. And also it makes you realise and appreciate those people all the more as well, doesn't
Yes.
it? At the end of it, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, you
And
really helped me.
yeah, and I've actually said this a lot to my athletes who are doing extra. Um, Because I think quite often people are hesitant to do an extra because they're like, oh, well, I need a support crew. It's a lot to ask someone. But as long as you've got the right relationship with that person, or you find somebody who wants to crew. So, for example, Keltman, which
Mm.
I did in 2022, I had a crew that I'd never met before, lovely couple who volunteered to crew for me. And they had an interest in the race, wanted to perhaps potentially race it in the future, but also just wanted to experience being a crew. And they loved it. And, they didn't know me at all before the race, but they had such a good time and they really enjoyed being part of it. And that is overwhelmingly what I hear from crews is
Mm.
that the experience of crewing someone through an X-Tri, and I've crewed a number of people through X-Tris, is so rewarding and so much fun. And yes, it's a really, really tough day, and it's you didn't any sleep the night before, and it's kind of the same as racing. It's exhausting, but it's just a wonderful experience.
Yeah, I think, and that could be a way for people to kind of get into, if they weren't sure, do I want to do it or not? They could accrue and then
Crew,
see, actually,
yeah,
yeah, and I'm getting just as much, because that's what I was worried about. I was like, well, I don't want to give all this work to someone that's a bit worried about it. But yeah, it was like
yeah,
really, she did really enjoy it and got a lot from it as well. Like
yeah,
for her confidence, it was really good because she was following the sat nav.
yeah,
She's like, I've got to trust the sat nav. I don't
yeah.
like it.
I
But
mean, and
yeah.
I think a lot of the races of this nature have a community that's grown up around them. Certainly Patagonman, certainly Keltman, and lots of others I can think of that have a kind of inbuilt support system where you
Mm.
can, there's a forum or there's just a community of people around, the social media who are ready to help, who will
Yeah.
answer questions, who will suggest people to be your support crew, who will put you in touch with the network. Um, I have never heard of somebody, even if they, at the last minute lose a crew because they, I don't know, break a leg or something. I've never heard of someone not being able to find crew for a race.
Mm.
And in Patagonia, I had my husband Mark was with me, but I had a local girl, Ilse, who supported me in 2022 and this year in 2024. Um, and she was just part of a community of people down in Patagonia who live locally who want to be involved in the
Right.
race.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love it. Awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna just change
Change tack.
focus a little bit.
Yeah.
So, Caroline, you're also a coach, and um, you recently wrote a little article about AI, and it's something that I'm really interested in and would love to explore a little bit with you and kind of explain to people how it works a little bit, and give people a little bit more understanding about it. So, I'm going to ask you a few questions about AI. You said to me that you're not an expert, but you know enough, and probably more than a lot of people, do who might be using these coaching platforms or thinking of using these coaching platforms. And you've obviously thought about it a lot, and looked into it. So it's great to have you on and talk about that. So the first question is really, what is an AI coaching platform? How does it function in the context of triathlon coaching? Let's take for an example, because this is a triathlon podcast.
Sure.
So what is
Sure.
it, and how does it
Well,
work?
I mean, okay, so yeah, I'm not an expert, and I'm not a programmer, or I don't come from a background of technology like that. But I am an expert in coaching. I am a
Mm,
long, I've been coaching triathlon for a long time, and life coaching and endurance sports coaching. So that's the perspective I come at it from, and I have looked into AI coaching because I also am heavily involved in a platform called Train Exhale.
mm,
So exhale without an E, which is similar to kind of Training Peaks. It's a training platform where people can record their training, they can be coached on there, that sort of thing. And as you rightly point out, AI has started to, well, I don't even know if we can say started anymore. It's having a massive influence on
mm,
this this part of the triathlon world, coaching. And I'm definitely not here to rubbish it in any way, because
mm,
I think it plays a role, and I think it's got an important role. But I also want people to understand a bit better what coaching really is, and how they can utilize AI, but how it can't ever stand in for human
mm.
interaction.
Yeah.
um, and we are talking specifically about triathlon, and let's be clear, there are other sports where AI plays a massive role and has for years. Team
Mm,
sports, statistics-based sports like tennis, golf. AI can spot patterns and process data in ways that humans never can. And
mm,
computers have been doing that also for years.
mm,
It's a very, very powerful tool in spotting patterns and processing data. Um, but we're not in those sports. We're in triathlon. It's very complex.
yeah.
It involves 3, 4, 5 different disciplines. If you include nutrition and strength and conditioning, and then all the technical work that goes into each of our 3 sports,
Mm,
and combining training plan for those 3 sports plus the other things over somebody's life commitments is very, very complicated and individual.
mm,
So, okay, so you asked how it works.
mm,
Um, so AI will take a source code, so it will be programmed to pull information from somewhere. And all the different AI platforms that are out there, there are lots,
mm,
will do this in different ways, and it kind of depends on how they've been created, what the goal is of that platform, and I guess in a way how much, not necessarily money, but how much time the creators have put into that. So
mm,
it will pull in a source code, and it might be, let's just as an example say it pulls in a source code of all of the 220 Triathlon magazine training programs that it's pushed out in the last 20 years.
mm,
So for example, if you wanted a free training plan, you could go to 220 magazine online. You could say, I need a 70-point free training plan. I'm a beginner.
mm,
Uh, I have completed one of these before. um, Give it some other inputs, and you would get a training
mm,
from that. It would probably be a PDF. It would sit online. So a very simple AI might just pull. You give it 5 inputs: gender, age, um, beginner, novice. What your level is, what your goal is, maybe a time, something like that, and it will just pull you a plan out.
mm,
Um, Now, once you have that plan, so similarly for you downloading a training plan from any of the free sources that you can download training plans from, how it then reacts and responds and updates and adapts to your training is the kind of difference between platforms.
Mm.
So some are based on this particular coach's. Um, so I don't want to mention any.
No, I know.
So some of the well-known triathlon AI platforms, um,
Yeah.
have specific coaches behind them whose
Impetus.
philosophies
Yeah.
are influencing how that training plan adapts.
Mm.
Others are just doing it. And some of these platforms are just pulling from all the source code on the internet, and there is
Yeah.
no filtration. It's just here's the latest development. Let's put
Yeah.
that.
Which doesn't always translate if it's, it's working for a pro triathlete or something like that, but not necessarily. But
Yeah.
yeah.
And I also think that there's, as somebody who's been heavily involved in sports coaching for a long time, I've seen trends come and go, as I'm sure many of your listeners have, and you have as well. There's always something new. There's always a new fad in terms of the way to specifically train for something or eat or what strength work to do, how often to do it. I don't know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Long runs, not long runs, intensity, no intensity,
Yeah.
And AI will just pull that information based on the number of hits that's had and how popular that information
Mm.
is, and um, how how much information there is on one particular topic, uh, which doesn't, which isn't always the best thing, right, for
Yeah.
somebody.
So
Um,
potentially it's open to following the trend rather than
mm,
what
I
good
think definitely in some
advice
cases,
is.
and
Yeah.
I really do wonder if um, it can ever be female specific because of that.
Mm.
And I know your listener base is obviously female
Yeah.
specific. And I think one of the things that we've learned recently in the last 5 years, really, like really recently, is how um, little information, detailed
Mm.
information there is about female physiology.
Yeah.
And that's only just starting to come through now. We're seeing such great developments, but it takes a human to know who to listen to
Yeah.
and to then go back to the source document, the actual research that was done, the people who were in that pool of subjects from which that
Mm.
data is then pulled to say, oh, well, hang on a minute, they were men in their 20s.
Mm.
This new theory about fasted training doesn't apply to women.
Mm.
But that takes, you know,
It takes someone like
understanding of
looking and understanding,
nuances.
whereas so like AI will pull data and it's very dependent on the data that gets put in. This is what I've kind of been saying is like what
Yes,
happens if the data is a problem? Like
yes,
say for example you're riding and you're using a power meter, quite often you get bad data on a power meter. You'll get like a random spike, and it's like, how does it discern that bad data and pull it out and then adapt to it? Because I've asked that question to someone and they couldn't give me an answer about it. It was like,
So,
don't know.
yeah, so I think the thing to remember with AI is it does learn
Yeah.
um, over a period of time. So it will learn about you. And if your average power for an endurance level 2 ride for 3 hours is 150 watts, and one day you go out and do 250, it's going to see that as an anomaly and
Yeah.
it's going to give it less weight.
Yeah.
But
But it
does it
wouldn't
know?
delete it
But
complete. Yeah.
yeah,
Would it
but
delete it
that's one example where it's quite
Yeah.
obvious. Um, but does it know when you're riding your road bike and your time trial bike,
Yeah.
and they've got different power meters, and actually they always read 10 watts different, or they always read
Mm.
15 watts different. Um, and what I will say is I think it will. I think there are things that AI will be able to do in the future that it can't do right now.
Yeah.
And it is going to get better, and it is going to be able to do those things. And actually, data analysis is something it can do better than probably any human can ever do.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't think, but having said that, I agree with you because I think less so on the bike, but certainly in things like swimming.
Mm,
Um, I mean, personally, I really, really hate people wearing watches in the pool anyway. But,
mm,
for example, I'm always getting athletes giving me or asking me about swim data,
mm,
be it in the pool or open water, and not realizing how completely wrong it is. And
mm,
it's really not worth the paper it's written on. And so,
mm.
that data, and swimming is one of the sports we do. There is literally no data for that. You have to manually input that data because data from your watch can never be accurate enough.
Mm.
And if you don't believe me, watch a YouTube video we put together on GPS data in open
Okay.
water. Um, and Mark and I swam with 3 different GPS devices around a set loop round buoys, and then looked at the data afterwards, just to show people, we were swimming together. We had different watches on,
Mm.
and then he had both of the watches on his wrist and swam,
Yeah.
and then behind his head, and just showing you the different accuracies and how inaccurate
Yeah.
GPS can be. You only need to wear your GPS on your turbo trainer, and it tells you you've done 500
Yeah,
meters
yeah.
to
You've
know
got that
that,
squiggly line, don't
yeah,
you?
to know that it's not accurate. Yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
I
I
think
mean,
yeah, what you're saying, like when it gets sort of correct, this is the thing, it's a machine, at the end of the day, it's a machine, isn't it? And if it gets machine-like data, something from a power meter, something from like, even like pace when you're running is
mm,
completely, it varies so much depending on
hmm,
terrain conditions,
hmm,
what you're running on, that kind of thing.
hmm,
Power's a useful one because it can go in and that is what it is. But the other sports are a bit
yeah,
more like, okay, well, we have to look at what else was happening, or where you were doing that interval, and did you do it in the same place as last time? Were you on a track? Were you there? There's so much noise, I think they
yeah.
call it, don't they, on the in the data, that it must be quite hard to figure that out.
I
And
think though that the point for me is not so much that as the other noise that goes with training. So
mm,
how much did you sleep the night before? Was it good quality
yeah,
sleep? Yes, we have data on that. Okay.
but that's not
Where
always
you
accurate either. The
That's
data
not.
on the
I
sleep as well.
people believe that as well, and it really isn't that accurate either.
Mm,
Um, you know, how stressful was your day? Did you feel well before your session? Um, were you focused? Were you motivated?
yeah,
Um, did you have good music on?
yeah.
The small things, sometimes big things, that make the difference between you having a good session and a bad session, or you know, even just hormones. You know,
Yeah.
some days we feel like on top of the world, and you can go out and run a certain pace, and the next day the same pace will feel really hard.
Mm,
And that doesn't mean that you're suddenly a worse athlete or worse runner. That just is just normal fluctuations in training patterns. But and a coach can pick that up. If one of my athletes
mm,
has a session and they say in their feedback, I felt really off today. I was really tired. And the next day, I felt really off today. I felt really tired.
yeah.
Okay, I know they need a rest day.
Mm,
But that's very subjective. It's knowing your athletes. It's
mm,
knowing what motivates them, and that emotional intelligence and that connection with your athlete. That's the thing that AI can never replace. No matter how good it gets at data analysis, and no matter how good our data gets, because I'm sure that will also get better.
mm.
You can never have a machine that has that level of connection and emotional intelligence.
No. And that affects, how would that affect an athlete, for example, if, they're not getting that from, it's fine, I've got my training program and I'm following it, and I'm going along of
Mm.
training for this event, how does it affect an athlete if they don't have that level of emotional intelligence from their coach? Because the AI is becoming their coach
Sure.
effectively.
So I think, just to say, there is definitely a place for an adaptive training program written by AI for somebody who just needs a training program
Yeah.
and who needs it to be able to adapt if they miss a session or if they run 12K instead of 10.
Mm.
Um, and that's absolutely what AI can do for somebody. And if you just don't have the knowledge to create your own training program, and it's easier for it to just be in a plan, so you don't have to think about it, and you've not done consistent training before, then I think that is a valuable use of this sort of training platform. And there are people out there who, just by training consistently, will get better because maybe
Yeah.
they've come from a background where they've not trained consistently before or not trained at all, or are just getting into triathlon, maybe from a background of swimming,
Mm.
and don't know how to progress the other sports. I think that is brilliant because it
Mm.
gives them a way to make those improvements to get to the level where perhaps they do need a coach then to make the next step.
Yeah.
But for people who want to progress to their potential in the sport, at some point, to reach that full potential, you need another human being's input.
Mm.
And that human being needs to be a coach who is experienced, who understands the three sports and triathlon as a sport itself, and who has a connection with you that you have a strong relationship with. So that's very personal. Some
Mm.
coaches are brilliant, but they just don't work for
Yeah.
some people because they don't connect with them, or their methods just don't work for the physiology of that athlete. Um, and as long as you can find that person and you have that emotional connection, that person can tap into the motivation, what
Mm.
motivates you, and learn how to get the best from you.
Mm. Yeah. Because with AI, it's very much like you get little badges and things like that, don't you? So, which is some form of motivation, but it's not the same as having that deep connection with someone that really like is. My husband and I talk about it. It's like having someone in your corner, like
Hmm.
they're there, they're on your side, they're looking out for you, and they're there even if you know you, when you're
Mm.
doing your sessions you're kind of thinking about your coach a little bit, and they're on your mind um, when you're out training. So we can't get that from AI or a machine. It's got to be from a human being.
Yeah, and I think also that way of being motivated by a machine, i.e., earning badges or
Yeah.
getting rewards or uh, filling a bucket full of stars or whatever it is. Um, Maybe that does work for some people. That sort of gamification of
Mm,
your progress. Um, I know for me, it very much doesn't work because
yeah.
I've tried it with learning Spanish
Yeah.
on
What's
Duolingo, and I
Duolingo?
hated
Yeah.
it. It absolutely drove me insane. I lasted about a week, and I was like, I just can't be doing with this because it's really annoying. So uh, I think it's understanding yourself enough well enough to know whether that's going to work for you or not.
Yeah,
But you're
and it's
absolutely
not
right.
just. Sorry, go on.
No, you I was going to say you're absolutely right. Like when I set sessions for my athletes, it's not just you know I don't know 5 times 5 minutes on the bike with 3 minutes off in between. Go.
Mm,
I will give them a narrative which I want in their heads when they're doing that session. You're doing the session because of X, Y, and Z. I want you to think about this sort
yeah.
of power. I want you to think about this sort of pedal stroke. Here's what we're aiming for. Here's how it's going to progress. And then, like you say, when they're on that session, they're thinking about what I've said and they're thinking about
Mm,
that, and it motivates them or it makes them do a specific thing in a session, think in a particular way. And yeah, that can't really be
Mm.
replicated.
No, and then it means so then you've got more intention going into the session. It's a word that I was thinking about today because I was
Mm.
talking about like because I climb a lot now instead of triathlon, and I got myself a coach because I was like, I want to progress faster, and he's giving me these drill, and it's really weird because in triathlon. I'm used to like, right, we write a plan and that's what you do, and I'm like, when's he going to give me my plan? And he's not giving me a plan. It's like, oh, just incorporate this into your warm up and think about this, and I'm like, okay, and how many do I do? You know, I'm kind of like wanting the
Yeah.
metrics, but it's not the same. He's wanting me to practice skills
Yes.
and become more like aware of my body movement and going into the session with an intent. And it works the same way with triathlon, doesn't it? Of having that intent going into the session. If you've just got, okay, we're doing 5 by 3 minutes at thresholds or whatever, and you don't really know why. I'm sure you don't get as much benefit from the session because you're ticking the box. You're not really thinking, okay, this is improving, because our
Mhm.
minds are super powerful. And if you go into that session and you think this is going to affect this part of my fitness, I think that will have an impact on you as well, not
No,
just the
I think,
physical.
you bring up a really good point there, and that is the mental side of the sport. And yes, I used to be a rock climber too, and it is obviously a huge theme in rock climbing. But it's also, for example, I've had a lot of athletes who've struggled with open water swimming,
Mm,
confidence,
yeah,
fear, um, even anticipation of cold water,
yeah,
those kind of things, which are it takes somebody, an experienced coach who's either experienced that themselves or who has coached other people through it, to be able to take somebody out of that state of fear
mm,
and help them to get to the point where that thing is normalized for them. And that's a very human interaction because you're dealing there with a, a block, a false barrier or false belief that somebody has about themselves,
mm,
which you need to unpick and understand before you can move them past that into, progressing to where they want to be.
yeah. Yeah, like identifying what the fear is, and
Hmm.
then getting to the bottom of it. Which, yeah,
Hmm.
you can't get that from a online.
No, I don't think you can.
Like,
And I think everybody has their very unique strengths and weaknesses, be they physical and mental. One example I gave in my article was, well, if you come from a swimming background,
mm,
the sessions that you're going to need to do to progress from swimming 145s per 100 because you're unfit and you've not been in a pool for a year or 5 years or 10 years, to swimming 120s, which you did as a kid, and
mm,
actually all it takes is getting you fitter, is completely different from trying to
yeah,
get a non-swimmer from that stage to 120s.
yeah,
Um, and the steps in that process are worlds apart. Um,
yeah,
and I'm sure there are ways that that could be built into AI in a certain,
yeah,
at a certain level. But I also think that there's so many, there's such a sliding scale between the two things.
mm,
And what comes into that as well is somebody's approach to it. How good are they at learning? Do they learn by seeing, trying, watching videos, reading, actually having somebody move their body for them in a particular way on the poolside?
mm,
How people learn is very different.
yeah, it is. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so yeah. It's got its place. It's not always, it can't provide everything. I just want to sort of circle back to female specific training because, as you said, we there's so much that is nuanced in that, and it is very, very new as well. It's only been in people's minds for the last few years, really. Before, we just ignored it and didn't really think about it. Um, you know, how do you incorporate that into your coaching, and why why can't AI do it?
Um, well, why can't AI do it is a difficult question.
Mm,
I don't know this for sure, and this is just opinion of Caroline Livesey. I don't think there's enough data
yeah.
at the moment for a machine to learn from, to then build a picture that's accurate enough to then serve the million different um,
Yeah.
different ways that the female can react to different phases of their cycle.
Yeah.
Um, and because I think it is so individual. Now, obviously, there are parts of female
Mm,
specific training which you can generalize. You know, we know now that females respond differently to fasted training, respond differently to different levels of protein in their diets, respond differently to strength and conditioning,
mm,
need to have different ways of doing strength and conditioning training. But there are definitely some things which are not generalized and
mm,
don't apply. And you know, I have um, I currently coach and have in the past coached athletes from the ages of 20 to nearly 60,
yeah.
and the range of different requirements in that age range is huge. But even within a very narrow age range, so athletes who I've got who are the same age, um, the way that they respond to their hormones doing different things at different times of their cycles can be so different. And one athlete can
Yeah.
feel exhausted for 3 days before the first day of their cycle,
Mm,
and doesn't want to do anything. It feels emotional, and you know, some have to have time off work, even, you know, are in a lot of
mm.
pain, those kind of things. And others are completely unaffected by it. And in the first day of their period, they're like, "Oh, I got my period." No idea, and
Didn't realise.
you know,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so and you know, the way I treat those athletes differently, it
Mm,
is huge because I've had to learn through coaching them for a period of time how their cycle is, how they are within that, um, and how it can vary from month to month. You know, quite a
yeah.
lot of athletes have sort of it changes. So you know, your ovaries cycle different alternate months, and so they'll have
Mm,
different reactions on one side from the other. And so
right.
one month will be fine, the next month will be awful. And
Yeah.
you, you know, it takes time. Even an individual won't know that about themselves
No.
because they've never paid attention to it. So how can a machine possibly know that about
Yeah.
somebody?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of complexity within it, isn't there? And it's it's down to the coach and the individual as well,
Mhm.
taking some
Mhm.
kind of responsibility for it and going, okay, what can I do? And also,
Yeah.
there's a lot to do with, you know, as you mentioned earlier, to do with sleep, nutrition that affects
Yes.
how people respond
Yes.
during their cycle.
Yeah.
Um,
And I
so,
mean,
so much.
we have on Train Excel we have a system of RPE.
Yeah.
So that's that's how we get athletes to score each session is based on a scale of 1 to 10. How hard was it?
Yeah.
And over time, you build up a um, series of data points related to the number of time they've spent in a particular RPE, and it's kind of like it comes out as a ratio between your chronic fatigue and your acute fatigue. So how acutely fatigued are you from sessions that day, for example, or that hour,
Yeah.
compared to like the fatigue that you've built up over the period of a week or a month or whatever. Um, and you get little red flags as a coach that pop up, and I'm sure you know, there's some other platforms that also work on RPE. Um,
Mm.
when that red flag pops up, I don't automatically think, well, this athlete's fatigued, I've got to pull
Mm.
back their training. I think, well, what does that mean?
Yeah. What's going
What
on?
is it flagging? Let's
Yeah.
have a look at the data.
Mm.
Um, you know, has something else happened in this person's life that has caused them to grade things more difficult than they actually are this week? And you know, so often that is the case. Something awful has happened in their lives,
Mm.
um, or they've been ill or something else, and it causes that balance the tip. And as a coach, you've got to be able to spot those things and react to that individual. Um,
Yeah,
and
it's
how
like
you,
someone checking in, going, "How are you doing?" You know, you're not going to get that from an AI software. It's not going to go, "How are you?" Or maybe it will, but it'll be a robot doing it for you.
yeah,
It's not quite the same, is it?
no. And I think one of the other things that really worries me about this trend in AI is a lot of when I've seen coaches pushing it or platforms pushing it, it's talking about expansion of that coach's ability to coach. So
Yes.
it's talking about
It frees you up. That's what they
uh
say, isn't
frees
it?
you up
It
to coach
frees you
more
up to
people
coach
or expand your
properly.
business.
Yeah, just do more of the the soft skills, which, coaching, as we're talking about it, may be classified as, and I don't like that term either, because it's like, what does that mean? And yeah, but yeah, it's pushing that kind of like, you are free to do the coaching bit, and we'll take care of the like data and the numbers and what have
The
you.
planning bit.
Yeah, you don't
Yeah.
have to.
And I don't I what I do- there's two things I don't like about that. One is um that you're, as a coach, then relinquishing some control anyway over your knowledge built up over a long period of time about what works and doesn't work for people.
Hmm.
And you're giving that control to an algorithm which you don't know what the source code is for,
Yeah.
which may constantly be changing. And I absolutely agree it can help at times.
Mm.
Um, but how often do you have an athlete where their progression is linear and they go
Mm.
from, couch to 5K to 10K to half marathon to marathon in a linear fashion with
Yeah.
no injuries, no illnesses, and they
Nothing
progress just
happens.
exactly as they're meant
Yeah.
to. Um, but I think the other thing I don't like about it is that it's almost pushing coaches to coach more people. You know,
Mm.
use this so that you're free to coach more because you've got more time, so you can have 20 athletes instead of 10 or 100 athletes instead of 50.
Yeah.
And and actually I don't think that as a narrative is valuable in the coaching world,
Mm.
because your brain only has the capacity to remember the nuances for a certain number of people. And for me, that's about 10
Yeah.
or less.
Yeah.
Um, and no amount of somebody else setting their programs for them or a machine setting their programs for them is going to help that. That is
Yeah.
just my capacity to
Yeah.
care and to understand that many people.
Yeah. Definitely. I agree with you there. It's like, and I want to have that relationship with those people on that level, rather than being like, well, I know a bit about that person, and a little bit about that
Mm,
person, and um
mm.
yeah, my husband's being coached at the moment, and I'm like, I don't want to say anything, but it's like, I don't think they know what's going on. It's like,
Yeah,
because they're
and that's so
coaching
often
lots
the
of
case.
people. Yeah, there's.
That's so often the case, and I think that's the other thing we need to recognise is that there's a very and it's a whole other topic, but there is a very wide range of um, ways that people coach and
Mm,
levels of support that you get from a coach.
yeah.
And for sure, there are coaches out there who are just setting programs. And I'm not saying
Mm.
that's wrong. That might
No,
be
it's
just what they're
what you
selling.
need.
I will
Yeah.
set you a program.
Yeah.
Fine. If you want to pay someone to set you a program because it takes it off your plate and it's and you're happy with that, that's fine. But that's very different to, for example, what I provide, which is a full life coaching,
Mm.
sports coaching service where you have unlimited interactions with me whenever you want. I talk to you every day on Exhale through the
Mm.
platform. I give you feedback on every single session. And it's very, very individual. And I sit down for a good amount of time every week and I think about you and I think about your
Mm.
plan and I think about what's coming next and what the progression is and how you are and what motivates you and all those things. It's
Yeah.
very different. And I think, um, just people just have to understand that the same as AI, there's a whole wide range of
Yeah.
coaching
Coaching
available out there.
options.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you've just got to think more about what you need specifically.
Mm.
If you're someone who's thinking about taking a coach or taking on an AI, joining an AI platform, just thinking very specifically about what it is you want,
Yeah.
what your goal is from this, and then thinking about whether or not, yeah, what level of support you need.
Yeah. And that can change as well as you kind of progress through the sport. As you mentioned earlier, AI might be useful as you're getting in. Although
Mm,
I sort of think as well that on some level it isn't as great if you don't understand like if you don't understand it, you're kind of like you can get misled in some ways by AI. It's telling you, oh, you've done, I put something up on Instagram the other day. It was Strava telling me that I'd spent all this time in this zone and what have you. And it was like, yeah, it's going off my wrist based heart rate and it's not accurate, but it's telling me all this information that's, yeah, you've done a great session. You're going to get really
mm,
fit. And I'm like, no, it's not going to happen
mm.
like that. It was a recovery run. But, if people don't understand those little
Understand it,
things or haven't got that information, then they're going to interpret that wrongly as
for
well.
sure.
But so you need a little bit
Yeah,
of understanding to use it as well, really, I think.
but there's also a really good point there, that occurs to me, which is, can you learn from being coached by AI? Because one of my, uh, fundamentals of my coaching is that I want my athletes to learn. I want them
Yeah,
to understand why they're having that session, what the purpose of the session is, why I've structured the plan in the way they have, like why they're doing a particular swim drill, all of those things, why we prepare for a race in a particular way, what the taper looks like, why it looks like that, why we change it, why it works for them, why it doesn't work for them.
yeah,
Those things are all things that they're learning from me all the time. And it's not just those things about training, it's what kit to wear, what races to go to, what climates might suit them,
yeah,
how to prepare if they're going to altitude, like a million different things. Um, can you, as a novice or beginner athlete, learn from an AI platform as
mm,
you're progressing? Does it tell you why you're doing the sessions? And if not,
mm,
then you're missing out on a massive amount of information.
yeah, definitely. Yeah,
So,
definitely. And some people they just want to get through, they just want to do the race once or something, and it's like a tick list, and they just want that plan for that. And I think maybe for those people, yeah, you're right. It's like, but if you do want to get more from the sport, and it's not just about doing triathlon, as I mentioned earlier before we started the call. I think we're learning a lot more through the sport about ourselves, and that you
mm,
yeah, like you're saying you do some life coaching. It is really like a life sort of lifestyle sport where you
for sure.
you learn
Yeah.
so much. So
And,
yeah,
and you share that journey with your coach. That's the other thing that I think, um, is massive, certainly for some of the athletes I coach, is that they are sharing that with me.
yeah,
I can celebrate their wins with them. I can celebrate the progressions. I can motivate them when things are not going particularly well, or they've got an injury, or those sorts of things. Um, and yeah, and I do. I said at the beginning, I do think there is a place, as you said, for people who, just need that taken away.
yeah,
That responsibility taken away. Just somebody write me a program that's going to at least progress me.
yeah.
That's absolutely fine. But um, yeah, it's understanding the
It can't give you
restrictions.
everything, can it? And
No.
that's the point I think we're trying to make. It's like
Yeah.
it's useful, but it's not going to give you everything that you need, and for that
Yeah.
you definitely need someone interpreting the data and also finding out about you as a person, because ultimately you need to know that to be able
Mm,
to race at your full potential, because
mm.
there's lots of challenges and we're all different, really.
And I was listening to one of your podcasts earlier about, you were talking about Ironman Wales,
Mm,
and I was thinking about how there are so many things that are specific to that race. I did that race in
yeah,
the first year, I think it was 2011,
okay,
um, and you know, for example, if you were coaching somebody for Ironman Wales, and it's a race you've done or a race you've spectated at or whatever, you're going to be able to give that person so many inputs that are really helpful for that race. Um, which is one of the things that is really important about having the right coach and having a good coach, is that they can share that knowledge with you.
Yeah, because you've been through that journey yourself. You know what, because I find that when I've got someone that's doing a race that I don't know that much about, I try and find out about it, but there's always like, we don't know until you've raced it, and I get the feedback and then find out about the course, and there's a really massive hill, and we could see that on the information, but I don't know how it's going to feel for someone, whereas I know how things might feel potentially. It's obviously not going to be the same experience, but you can get a bit of an idea, can't you?
Yeah,
for sure. Awesome. So thank you so much for your time and answering my questions. It's been quite a sort of just discussion, really.
Yeah.
Rather than interview, but yeah, it's nice to talk about that, and I think there'll be some really useful information for people. Where can people find you, find out more about you? And I will put all these links in the show notes and underneath, but yeah, if you just want to let people know, that'd be great.
Well, the best place to follow me is on Instagram, Caroline.Livesey. But my husband is actually a filmmaker, documentary maker.
Yeah.
And so we've got quite a number of films about our adventures and races and things on YouTube, and he's the Brick Session.
Yeah.
So its YouTube channel is just at the Brick Session.
Okay.
And if people are interested in watching something about Patagonman, then our film is called Patagonman Triathlon's Wild Giant, is on YouTube.
Is that out now? Is that from the
that's one from 2 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So that's out now. The one from this year will be out shortly. But we've got films on there about ultra cycling in Colombia, and I've got one called Norseman, A Day of Extremes, when I did the Norseman. So that's on there as well. But I think the Patagonman one is really nice because it does bring to life that part of the world. And if it's something you're thinking about doing an extreme triathlon, I'd recommend watching it, because it definitely kind of breaks down the race a bit and makes it feel like it's more manageable for people. It's something that is achievable for everybody, basically. So yeah, have a watch of the films.
I'm gonna have to watch that one, aren't I?
Yeah. I'll send you a link.
Yeah, no, it looks amazing. Really.
Get it back on your bucket list. It's good climbing down there too. I've actually rock climbed down there many moons ago.
Yeah, well, that was another reason it sort of appealed to me, Patagonia, because I've seen lots of films about it, climbing. But yeah, then I have to train for triathlon instead of climbing. It's so hard because I'm like, the age I'm at now, I'm like, I want to stay strong in my climbing, but and maybe one day I'll get back into triathlon. But yeah, I don't know. I see what happens.
One thing at a time.
You've got to go with where you feel like you want to. But it was on my bucket list, and I think it might, maybe.
Well, watch the film, see what you think.
I will watch the film. Definitely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, and
thank you for having me on.
No worries.
And if anyone's got any specific questions, they can fire it at me on social media. I may not be able to answer, but I'll do my best.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for that. Thanks for listening today. Have a great day. Take care. Bye for now.